Welcome back to Miles Reads that I'm Miles. And today we're not just reading a book, we're reading life through a new lens. Think the poor are poor just because they're lazy? Think again. Two MIT professors spent a decade spanning 5 continents and 18 of the world's poorest countries to uncover a startling truth. Poverty isn't just a lack of money. It's a mental trap. You might not consider yourself poor, but if you consistently prioritize the immediate moment, resist new ideas, and refuse to plan for the long term, you're living with a poverty mindset. Today, we're breaking down Poor Economics, the book acclaimed by the Financial Times as a best book of the year. By understanding the psychological machinery behind poverty, you might just be able to rewire your own future. The authors, Abhijit V. Banerjee and Esther Duflo, both economics professors at MIT, argue that poverty is fundamentally an economic problem. Therefore, a deeper understanding of poverty sharpens our understanding of economics itself. This book redefines the very concept of poverty, shattering our narrow preconceptions and offering a profound analysis of economic life from the ground up. Written with academic rigor, its conclusions are built on a mountain of first-hand field experiments and surveys, making its content exceptionally solid. The book's central mission is to answer one fundamental question: why are the poor so poor? The authors identify 3 core reasons. First, the poor lack effective tools to manage risk. Second, they don't engage in long-term planning. Third, they are filled with stubbornness and prejudice toward things beyond their scope of understanding. Let's explore each one. First, the poor lack effective risk management tools. Many of us hold a prejudiced view that the poor are architects of their own misfortune, that they are lazy, undisciplined, resistant to change, or even foolish. But is this stereotype accurate? Is there really a fundamental difference between us and the world's most impoverished people? After extensive investigation, the authors of Poor Economics concluded that a key reason for poverty is the primitive nature of the poor's risk mitigation strategies. Take, for example, the tendency to have many children. This seems backward. With limited resources, more children mean each one gets less nutrition and education, trapping them in a cycle of poverty. From this perspective, having more children looks incredibly short-sighted. But they do it for a reason, and it's not because they naively believe more children will make them rich. The authors point out that the real driver is risk management. In many developing nations, social safety nets are non-existent. The risks of old age and illness must be borne by one's children. But children are inherently uncertain. They might die young, struggle themselves, or have a poor relationship with their parents. Faced with these risks, the only strategy is to have a few more to hedge against the uncertainty. Therefore, having many children is a rational calculation, albeit a crude one that severely limits wealth accumulation and makes life incredibly hard. But we cannot call them foolish. They are weighing the pros and cons from their own standpoint. More importantly, our own decision to have fewer children may have little to do with being more enlightened. Studies show that robust social safety nets, like health insurance and pensions, significantly lower fertility rates. We have fewer children because our social support system allows us to. It's a consequence of security, not superior thinking. Marriage is another risk management tool. In India, for instance, poor families often marry their daughters in villages that are not too close, but not too far. Why? If the villages are too close, they share the same climate. A disaster in one likely means a disaster in the other, eliminating the possibility of mutual support. The villages must be distant enough to have different climates, so one can help the other in a time of crisis. But if they're too far, communication and aid become impractical. A strategically distanced marriage benefits the entire family's ability to weather storms. Clearly, the poor are both intelligent and rational. But what about major disasters or illnesses where these methods fall short? They have one more card to play: borrowing money, typically through microloans. In countries like India, microfinance institutions cater to the poor, but their interest rates can be 10 or even several dozen times higher than a bank's. amounting to predatory lending. Why would they borrow at such high rates? Banks, to mitigate their own risk, lend to those with assets to use as collateral. The poor have nothing. Microlenders are willing to take that risk. But since it's a high-risk business, they must charge extremely high interest to cover the inevitable defaults. In this sense, they aren't just exploiting the poor, they're helping them survive. This model even gained international acclaim when Muhammad Yunus, founder of a microloan company in Bangladesh, won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2006. Ultimately, however, using high-interest debt to manage risk is highly inefficient. It creates a vicious cycle. High default rates among the poor force lenders to conduct costly background checks, driving up interest rates further. Faced with crippling interest, the poor are even less likely or able to repay, creating an inescapable trap. Their primary tools for managing risk, large families, strategic marriages, and high-interest loans, are simply too costly and ineffective. The second reason for poverty is a lack of long-term planning. In many regions, the poor don't prioritize education. Even when charities build schools and preach the benefits of learning, parents remain unenthusiastic. The reason is simple. Education is a long-term investment. It's a massive risk to bet a family's scarce resources on one child's education for a payoff that's decades away, with no guarantee that child will be the one to care for them in old age. They'd rather spend the money on something with an immediate impact, like better food. Similarly, while professionals know their value lies in developing core expertise, the poor often work multiple odd jobs just to make ends meet. This is a losing strategy in the long run, as it prevents them from mastering any single skill that could lift them out of poverty. But the income boost from multiple gigs is immediate, whereas the goal of becoming an expert is too distant to feel real. We might assume that if the hungry poor receive food aid, they buy more food. But the author's social experiments in India revealed something fascinating. When they could afford more food, they didn't just buy more calories. They bought better tasting, more expensive food. Some even used the money to buy TVs and radios. This isn't an anomaly. In Nicaragua, 56% of rural households own a radio and 21% a TV. Even in desperately poor areas of India, families spend 14% of their budget on religious festivals. Why would they spend on seemingly frivolous things instead of saving or buying more staples? The authors discovered that while getting enough calories is important, their most urgent desire is to add a little color and excitement to their otherwise hopeless and monotonous lives. A TV, a special meal, or a joyful festival accomplishes that. Their thinking is, any meaningful change will take forever, so instead of making vague long-term plans, let's live in the now and make today as pleasant as possible. This lack of foresight is both a cause and a consequence of poverty. There's a biological reason for this. Stress levels are linked to the hormone cortisol. The poor live under constant stress, leading to chronically high cortisol levels, which damages key brain areas responsible for cognitive function. High cortisol literally impairs the ability to make rational, long-term decisions. This creates a feedback loop. Chronic poverty breeds hopelessness, which erodes the self-control needed to escape, leading to a focus on immediate gratification that keeps them trapped. The third cause of poverty is entrenched bias and cognitive limitation, especially in areas beyond their understanding. Take healthcare. The poor in many countries spend a significant portion of their income on health, 5% of the monthly budget for rural families in India. The problem is how they spend it. They favor expensive cures over cheap prevention. They don't spend small amounts on vaccinations or bed nets, but wait until a major health crisis hits and then borrow heavily for costly treatments that often bankrupt them. This flawed medical view stems from their environment. They believe 4 drips are more effective than pills and overuse antibiotics. If a doctor correctly diagnoses a self-limiting illness like the flu and prescribes nothing, the patient, upon recovering, will believe the doctor did nothing for them. Conversely, if another doctor gives them an unnecessary antibiotic shot, they might feel a little better and falsely attribute their recovery to the injection. This breeds a deep-seated, baseless mistrust of medical professionals. This is why they ignore preventative advice like vaccinations. They see that a vaccinated child doesn't get measles, but notice that not every unvaccinated child gets it either. To them, this proves the vaccine is useless. They can't grasp that some vaccines require multiple doses to be effective, or that one vaccine only prevents one disease. If a vaccinated child gets sick with something else, they feel scammed and refuse further immunizations. In fields where their knowledge is lacking, this stubbornness and bias make it impossible to manage risks effectively, deepening their poverty. So, to recap, the poor are poor because of primitive risk management tools, a lack of long-term planning, and cognitive biases. But the key takeaway isn't just knowing these reasons, it's recognizing how they apply to us. Unfortunately, the last two, short-sightedness and cognitive bias, are universal. We all know it's smarter to spend a little on gym memberships and checkups to prevent catastrophic health bills later. Yet many of us, especially in our parents' generation, save pennies their whole lives only to have the family go in a massive debt for last-ditch surgeries when a major illness is found too late. How is this not the same poverty mindset? Many young people sacrifice their education and careers for video games. Why? Because games are built on instant feedback. Every kill and every quest gives you an immediate reward. In contrast, the rewards of studying and working are long-term and abstract. In this, are we any different from the poor who spend their extra cash on a tastier meal instead of their child's education? We are just as biased in areas we don't understand. How many people passionately oppose GMO foods without knowing what they are, operating on a gut feeling that artificial is bad and natural is good? When scientists confirm their safety, they're dismissed as corporate shills. We don't understand our own lab results, yet we instinctively assume doctors are overprescribing to make a profit. In areas outside our expertise, we too default to emotion and intuition. In this sense, there is no fundamental difference between us and the poor. The one advantage we have is that we've sidestepped the first poverty trap. Our risk management tools are far more advanced. We live in a society with health insurance, pensions, banks, and social safety nets. We don't need to have more children or borrow from loan sharks to hedge against uncertainty. This has little to do with our own intelligence or effort. Many of our securities were given to us without our even realizing it. Our world runs on autopilot. Our children are vaccinated at birth. We rarely question why, because it's simply what everyone does. But convincing a poor person in Africa to accept the foreign concept of a vaccine is met with fierce resistance. We were born into homes with clean running water, a fact that drastically improves hygiene without ever needing to understand how plumbing or chlorination works. Most importantly, the majority of us don't have to worry about our next meal. We don't have to expend precious willpower and decision-making energy fighting basic survival instincts. The poor must use that mental energy every single moment. The author's conclusion is profound. We are not fundamentally different from the world's poorest people. We are all susceptible to the same cognitive errors. The only real difference is that we were born into a world with robust, automated systems, while theirs is broken. The essence of poverty is not merely a lack of resources or flawed systems, but something rooted in universal human weakness. To escape the poverty trap of the mind, we must all learn to use reason to override our short-sighted human nature and avoid thinking with our gut when faced with complex problems. Thanks for reading with me today. If this book sparked a thought, let me know in the comments. Subscribe to Miles Reads, and let's keep growing one book at a time.